Hey guys, what is up? It is prime time here for another StarCraft 2 replay of basically just one of my build orders. And as you can see, this is going to be on Daybreak today. And my opponent is going to be the red Terran player. His name is Ying. And today we're going to get to see a pretty long PvT. It basically covers, in this replay, it basically covers everything that I really want to talk about for this particular build order. For the most part, I think. As of right now, I can't really think too much of stuff that this video isn't really, well, okay, there's one thing, but we'll get to that. So yeah, anyway, this is going to be the first, probably one of two videos, one of two replays, I should say, of my PvT build. And I actually am using two different PvT builds right now on ladder. I would say this is my best matchup, even though my PvZ has developed quite a bit recently. So, and yes, I have made a couple adjustments to my Protoss versus Zerg strategy that I showed on the channel. So, I might give you guys a couple updates on that soon, once I've really got everything figured out that I want to show you. And actually, we've already missed a couple things here. So I guess, before I get too much into explaining everything, we'll look at the build order and sort of how this works out. So right now, you'll notice that I built the pylon on 9 supply, obviously, and then when that finishes up, I chrono the Nexus, which is extremely standard. That's just what you do. But actually, right when that chrono boost has expired, I do it again before I get the gateway, and I'll show you guys that right now. So what we see right now is the second chrono boost going down. Or no, this is still the first one. This is the first one finishing up. And then the second one will go down right now. Okay, and you see how my 12th probe is rallied? This actually times out like perfectly. Okay, well, you can build a gateway with this probe and then just go ahead and scout with it, but I didn't do that this time. But you can see you can constantly use chrono boost on your Nexus and get your gateway at 13 supply. And then I also would say get your assimilator at 14 supply, but it's okay. I mean, that just means you delay a probe for a couple seconds, but it's not a big deal. You know, I'm going over this very precisely right now, and I know we've only talked about like 2 things, but I just want you guys to realize that if you use 2 chrono boosts instead of 3 before you get your Nexus, or if you get your gateway at 15 and your gas at 14 or whatever, it's not a big deal. This is the general concept of this build, which is important. I will say though, if you do make a number of I don't really want to say mistakes, but they kind of are. It's sort of like basically you're not doing the build order precisely how I'm sort of showing it right now. If you do a couple, like a few different things wrong, and your opponent brings some early pressure, it can be a little bit more difficult to handle, obviously, but you should still be okay. We can see the Nexus is going down right now. His command center is going down, and that Nexus is before the second pylon. And what we're going to see is I'm going to build the second pylon on the high ground, and now this is actually kind of important. I do want to just mention real quick that Warp Gate research has started, and I actually get sentry first, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let me just let this play a second. The reason I put the pylon up here instead of on the low ground, and by the way, if you are going to put it on the low ground, I would probably suggest putting it back here. The reason I suggest putting the pylon here, though, is if your opponent decides to do some sort of one base all in, then you might have to cancel your Nexus, in which case if your pylon is on the low ground, it will just get sniped. So that is not good. That's why I put it on the high ground. It basically, you know, serves the same role as putting it on the low ground, except it's safer. So with that said, I just want to quickly mention that. And before I move on to the production of stuff, whoops, that's not what I want. We do see I scouted the command center, and on most maps on some maps you'll have a problem getting up the ramp to scout. On maps like Daybreak, you can actually come in from the side and then like hang, like, you know, like tuck around the edge of this little thing right here. and get into the command center. And but basically, what I'm trying to get at is scouting around 4 minutes or a little bit earlier for command center is pretty a pretty good timing, because they won't have too many Marines to kill your worker, and it's also a standard timing for them to grab that expo. So if you don't see the expo there, I know in Masters basically they only put it on the low ground if they're going to expand. They don't put it on the high ground and then float it down there. But if you don't see an expo, so like if you're a Masters player and you don't see an expo, I would say prepare yourself for a one base all in. Although those are uncommon, people still do them. You know, it's not like they can't do them. So, but then again, you also just keep in mind that they can float it down. So you will see how I follow up this one gate, and I'll sort of elaborate a little bit more on how to respond to not seeing a command center here, and also basically how to respond to early pressure, because we will get to see some this game. But right now we can see sentries being built out of the gateway. You do want to chrono boost the gateway in case you get some early pressure. And then I'm building probes in the Nexus, so I dump a chrono into both as soon as this pylon finishes. And after the sentry is built, I get a stalker. Now you're going to see right now that I built a pylon right here, and you can afford to do this, and there's not really too much of a reason not to. The thing is though, if you get your Nexus at a standard time, this Nexus and this pylon are going to finish at the same time. So the extra supply your pylon gives you doesn't really matter. So if you forget this pylon or you delay it or whatever, no big deal. It might actually be better, but I just sort of get it anyway. Now you are still on one gateway as of now, as you can see. You're on one gateway, that is. And you just want to chrono boost this as much as you can afford to. And I get one sentry and then follow that up with anywhere from 2 to 4 stalkers, depending on how safe you're feeling. And typically, because I get sentry first, I will actually wait until I get 2 stalkers to push across the map to try to get some sort of map control and just to see what's going on in the space. You will note that I have a probe on the tower. Anytime you know the towers are safe to take with a probe, I highly suggest doing so with this build, and we will see why. But map vision is very important with this build, and anyway, so we will see plenty of map vision as this game progresses. What you're going to note right now is the cybernetics research. When this gets to around 100 seconds, you want to add on 2 more gateways. And the reason I say 100 seconds is because a gateway takes 65 seconds to make. So with 100 seconds left, with 60 seconds left to build, your gateways are going to be finishing up as well. So you can make all these 3 gateways to the warp gates right when they come up, basically. So yay for timing. Now it's the 6:15 minute mark, and I'm sending a probe right now to build a pylon. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Be careful poking up the ramp, by the way, because this can be unsafe, especially if they have like a marauder with concussive shell for whatever reason. And we can see a decent amount of Marines here progressing across the map. And if you do see a ball of Marines moving out, it can be tempting to try to kite them with stalkers. But unless your macro is really good, I don't really know if I would suggest doing that, because just simply macroing back up at home and then defending your base when the push arrives is usually the safer bet, I should say, in this situation. And I do want to say one more thing about this early timing push. Basically, if you know your opponent has expoed, the sort of like early pushes they can do, like whether it's Marauder Marine, just Marine, or whatever they're doing, usually those will come around 7 minutes. So just have that time in mind. And as you can see, these will be warp gates by that time. And because of this early sentry, you're able to force field the ramp. And most maps with just one ramp will take 2 force fields to block. Actually, I don't know if there's none that don't take any more. Or less, I should say. And then some ramps do take more than just 2 force fields. Sort of like Condemned Ridge, just to give you one example. Anyway, so what we missed while I was talking about the sweet ramp was around the 6:40 minute mark for this build, you want to get your next 3 assimilators. And also, after you build those 3 assimilators, you want to get your robo facility, and we're going to see why in a second. And if you don't need to produce units, just stick on these 4 units, and that's completely fine. And what we're actually going to see is, I don't know if I'm completely aware that he is pushing me right now, although the first ball of Marines that I saw should have cued me off to the fact that he is attacking me. Basically, if you can afford to add on a few more sentries, which typically you will be able to get anywhere from 2 to 4 sentries, depending on how early your gas are, just get those sooner than later, because you'll be able to accumulate energy faster with those. And right now we're going to see him push up the ramp. And there's a bunch of ways you can play this as, in defense. And I do want to show the army supply right now. He is vastly ahead in army supply. The robo is about finishing up, and typically what you want to do is right when this robo is nearly done or is done, you want to add on the robo bay and another robo facility. The reason you add them both on at the same time is because they both take about the same time to finish, and when we see that wrap up, I will mention why you do that. And what you see on the mini-map, in case you weren't paying attention, or I don't know, whatever, is a bunch of pylons going down around the map. Now, I guess I'll just cover this right now before this attack really reaches my base. And by the way, this is coming at 8 minutes, which honestly seems a little bit late for the number of Marines we see coming. But still, if this was coming at 7 minutes, I think I could have held this off. And so should you be able to with the sentries, as well as if you do need to pull workers, because anytime you see this aggression, you're going to be ahead in workers. And against Terran, they do have mules to sort of balance that out. But I think if this did come a little bit earlier, he'd be much further behind in the worker count, so that's why it is a little bit delayed. But yeah, so the pylons here are for one key reason, and then they also serve a couple other purposes. The main reason I have these placed, let's just go to my vision for a second. Just look at my vision of the map. If your opponent is going to send a dropship at you, which will typically come around the 10-minute mark, the earliest it'll come is around the 10-minute mark, by the way. If he were to send a dropship, he might send it down here, this sort of angle, which this pylon will see. He might send it more directly through here, which that pylon would see and scout for me. He might send it around the 3rd to the natural. This pylon would see that. Basically, what I'm getting at here is I have pylons placed all over the place, and we'll see how my pylon, the contagion of my pylons will spread throughout the map, and we'll see that happen. And also why those pylons can be used to obviously warp in units and intercept dropships, or if he's retreating from somewhere, you can warp in units to cut them off, and just anything really. And also putting pylons over here and over here to scout for drops as well is also something I would recommend. And in doing so, especially putting them over here, like you can see right now, once your opponent takes a 3rd base or even a 4th, or in either order, I guess, you can just send in some zealots to harass, and that's a really good way to harass. Really easy, really efficient. And right now, you can see the forces are just too much for him, so he's going to pull back. Now, if you just saw that, you don't. Well, obviously you just saw that, but if your eyes were open, you saw that. My point is, what I'm trying to say is, you don't need to be right on the ramp. You can be back here. You can use your workers to fight if you mess up your force fields, or if, let's say, you got your gas late, you don't have the 2 extra sentries, or whatever amount of sentries you end up getting. But pull probes if you need to, is my point. And also, I mean, you could get back here, you can just force field his army and Guardian Shield or whatever. By the way, Guardian Shield is really, really good against Marines. It only affects the armor, and for Stalkers, that's only half their health. But it still gives 2 extra armor, right? Hold on. Yeah, it gives 2 extra armor. Which means Marines are now doing 3 damage, which is just nothing. Especially against Zealots, because they have 100 hit points on the health.